Okay, as Robin mentioned, I'll be going over the forms used for campaign disclosure and also for conflict of interest reporting. Here on our PowerPoint, you see a list of the forms that you most likely would be using. Campaign disclosure reporting is mandated by the Political Reform Act of 1974. It's a state program that's monitored by both the Secretary of State's office and the Fair Political Practices Commission. The program puts the financial activity of all political candidates and committees into the public domain. The public and press are allowed to view the financial disclosure paperwork in order to see who is making contributions to candidates and committees, and also to see how they are spending their money. Okay, the amount of money that you spend is going to determine your filing obligations. The more money that you raise or spend, the more forms that you will need to be acquainted with. And your filing obligations for these forms begins when you start raising or spending money. So it is possible that you would need to start this paperwork before you even come in and file for office. Okay. The Fair Political Practices Commission defines contributions as loans, personal loans, gifts, and non-monetary items such as office space and time. And the first form we're going to look at is the Form 501. Before you raise any money or spend any money, you will, from your personal funds other than your candidate statement of qualifications or your filing fee, then you will need to file this form. Generally, we recommend that all candidates go ahead and file this form because sometimes at the last minute you decide you want to do something, and if you haven't filed the form yet, it may hold you up in your plans. Candidates for the special districts and school districts will be filing the Form 501 with the County Elections Office. If you are running for a city office such as city council, town council, or treasurer, you'll be filing this form with the city clerk. This form is very simple. It consists mainly of your name, your address, and the office that you're seeking. Okay, next, you'll want to consider how much money you're willing to raise and spend on your campaign. If you remain below the $1,000 threshold, the paperwork is very simple. However, once you go beyond that $1,000 threshold, you will have more filing obligations, and they will become a little more detailed. If you accept any contributions, you will need the contributor's name, address, occupation if it's an individual, and employer, and also the dollar amount or the fair market value of the contribution. If you do not get this information within 60 days of receipt, the law requires you to return the contribution. The FPPC also requires you to keep a copy of the check. Now, for any expenditures that you make for your campaign, you will need the name and address of who you paid and what the payment was for, how much you spent, and you'll need to keep all of your receipts. Now, when we're talking about the Political Reform Act and we make references to addresses, those do need to be physical addresses, not P.O. boxes. If you give us something P.O. boxes, you'll be receiving a letter from me asking you to give us the physical addresses. Okay, now first we're going to look at the filing obligations if you stay below that $1,000 threshold. If you stay below that threshold, which also includes those who don't spend any money on their campaigns, you'll be filing the Form 470. And the original, if it's special or school districts, will be filed with our office. And again, if you're running for city office, all of these forms will be filed with the city clerk rather than with the elections division. And the Form 470 is another simple form like the Form 501. It's asking for your name, your address, and the office you're running for. And you can file this at the same time you file the rest of your paperwork. And we also have schedules we can give you of all the filing deadlines for campaign disclosure paperwork. Now, there is a second page to this form that you may or may not be using. The second page is referred to as the Form 470 supplement. If you remain below $1,000, you won't be using this form. However, if you either raise $1,000 or spend, it's not both, it's either or, you will need to file this page. This page is filed with the Secretary of State's office, the Elections Division or City Clerk, depending on what you're running for, and with each candidate who is seeking the same office. It may be submitted by guaranteed overnight delivery, personal delivery, or fax. And you do have a fairly short time frame. It will need to be filed within 48 hours of reaching the $1,000 threshold. Now, if you do reach that threshold within 10 days, you will need to file a Statement of Organization, Form 410. The original and one copy are filed with the Secretary of State's office, and one copy is filed with the Elections Division or City Clerk. If you know that you will be raising or spending more than $1,000, you can also file this form ahead of time. You don't need to wait till then. And this is basically the form that's creating your campaign committee. When you file the Form 410, the Secretary of State's office is going to issue you, I believe they're up to 7 digits now, ID number. And many candidates and committees will use that ID number on their campaign literature signs as their identifier. Okay, and once you've reached that point, have started that committee, you're also going to graduate from the Form 470 to the Form 460. And this is the form that is going to be using all of those records that you've been keeping of your contributions and expenditures. This form is filed semi-annually until you terminate your committee, so your obligations may not end with the election. There are also 2 pre-election deadlines. They are approximately 45 days before the election and 14 days before the election. You will be itemizing any contributions you receive or expenditures you make within the filing period that form is for on the Form 460. And we would like to point out that there are fines issued if you miss the filing deadlines. So pay attention to the filing schedule, because we'd much rather you file on time than have to remind you that you didn't file yet or issue those fines. It's the responsibility of the candidate or the committee to be aware of the deadlines and to file the required financial disclosure statements in a correct and timely manner. Our office has the forms on hand if you need them, and we'd be happy to supply them to you. You can also obtain them from the Fair Political Practices website. We're also available to help with any questions you may have.